What should the primary goal of a Jewish spiritual leader be? What is their focus? Well, the Rebbe actually wrote a note, handwritten note, to one of his secretaries, Rabbi Krinsky, in relationship with the fifth day of Teves, known as Hey Teves, where he actually expresses what the primary focus of a Chabad Rebbe is. And I'm going to share the translation of this handwritten note that the Rebbe wrote to him. And this is what he wrote. As with all Chabad Rebbes, the first foundation is truthfully nullifying one's own existence, starting with himself. Being a Rebbe, it is his integral and primary mission to guide and strengthen the Hasidim in Torah and mitzvahs in general, beginning with the belief in Hashem, in God, keeping the laws of the code of Jewish law, etc., and to show them a living example of this. That means being a living example of a selfless person who has complete belief in God and abides by all of the instructions of the code of Jewish law, even when it requires the extent of actual mesiras nefesh, of actual self-sacrifice. It is self-understood that a Rebbe must also withhold all actions that may mistakenly be explained contrary to the above. Only after this comes the Rebbe's private life. And in this aspect as well, the foundation upon which upon which his private life is lived, is not to interfere at all with his general and primary purpose. So in other words, the primary purpose of a Chabad Rebbe as a spiritual leader of the Jewish people is built upon a fundamental idea of selflessness, that I am consumed in the needs of others. Very, very powerful. And when we think about this, we begin to realize that this is the height of what a human being can reach, where one lets go of self and embraces other being God and other being others. When we read from the Torah about the story of Joseph in Parshas Vayigash, we find a very interesting thing, and that is that Yosef sends, once he shares with his brothers, I am Yosef, I am Joseph, is our father still alive? He sends his brothers back home to let their father know that he's alive. His father had no idea what happened to him, and it was under the belief that he was killed by a wild animal. And what does he do? He sends his brothers back with wagons filled with all of the delicacies of Egypt. And the Hebrew word for a wagon is nagala. Agala is a wagon. And Rashi says, why was it that Yosef specifically sent wagons, agalos? He says the reason why is because he was subtly hinting to his father a message that if you're questioning whether it is truly me, your son Yosef, the wagons that I'm sending you, which in Hebrew are called in Agala, will be the secret between me and you, that it in fact is me. How is this a secret message to his father? As Rashi, the commentary, explains, because the last conversation that Yaakov had with his son Yosef, was a discussion about a very unusual mitzvah in the Torah, which we find in the book of Deuteronomy, the fifth book of the Torah, of Devarim, called Eglah Arufa. And Eglah Arufa is about a calf. And if you can hear it, you can hear Agala, wagon, Eglah, calf. They both are actually spelled exactly the same way. It's only that the vowels are different and therefore produce a different word. One is pronounced Eglah, one is pronounced Agala. One means a calf, one means a wagon. And in this way, he was hinting to his father that it's me, Yosef, and I still remember the last Torah conversation that you and I had together. Now, what is this conversation? This conversation and this Torah topic is about a scenario, and I'm just going to give you the general idea that relevant to our conversation. The general idea that if, God forbid, a man leaves a city or a town and they find his dead body some distance away from the town, that the elders of the city have to go through an entire ceremony and process which involves a calf, where they have to say that our city did not commit this murder. And part of the reason why they are responsible to go through this process is because we know there's a special mitzvah that when a guest leaves you, you're supposed to escort them. And the fact that this man left their city and then was found dead is a little bit of a stain on them. And therefore, they have to declare that our hands did not spill this blood. Because the Jewish people at our core have great responsibility for each other. As the Talmud tells us, Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh B'Zeh, every Jew must be a guarantor for each other. That means we are responsible for each other. A person only carries deep responsibility for another when we are selfless. When we have that characteristic that we develop more and more deeply over time, because nature for a human being is to be selfish, is to think about self, not to think about the other. But this is the height of responsibility. And Yosef is actually expressing to his father that this idea, this fundamental teaching that you taught me about how critical it is for us to be selfless, I never forgot this lesson. And essentially, Yosef, in fact, had this great leadership characteristic that all Jewish leaders must have to be a true Jewish leader of the Jewish people, not just of my congregation, but of the Jewish people. I have to be someone who's consumed in the needs of the Jewish people. And in fact, Yosef demonstrated this in the most beautiful manner possible. Because when his brothers, when he finally disclosed himself to his brothers, he said, "Fear not." The brothers were terrified because they sold Yosef into slavery. Now Yosef is basically the second most powerful man in the world. He's the viceroy of Egypt, which was the superpower of the world. And now they were caught. And they were worried, what is Yosef going to do to them for them having put him through this misery for all of these years? And you know what Yosef said? God sent me to Egypt in order to make sure that I will be able to sustain the family. In other words, Yosef did not blame them. Yosef maintained his unity as a brother with his brothers, which is unbelievable when we think about that the pain and suffering that he had gone through for 22 years, right? And he didn't blame his brothers. He remained connected with his brothers. True, his brothers did a terrible thing. True, his brothers have an accounting with God. And true, that Yosef says that's your business with God. My business with you is we are brothers. That I, as a Jewish leader, care about all Jews, no matter what type of a situation they are in, no matter what they may have done. Very, very powerful. The former chief rabbi of Israel, Ashkenazi chief rabbi of Israel, Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau, he shares a fascinating story in his book. I think the name of the book is Out of Depths, or Out of My Depths, Out of the Depths, something to that effect. And he shares there that he had a brother, which if I remember correctly, his nickname was Naftulchik. His name was Naphtali, an older brother. And his older brother also, he and his older brother, they both survived the Auschwitz. And his older brother had the job where they built a sort of like a sled made out of 2 planks of wood on an angle. And what they would do is after they killed Jews in the gas chambers, they would pile bodies onto these sleds, and the Jewish inmates in Auschwitz needed to drag these sleds to the crematorium where they would burn all the bodies. God forbid, God forbid. Terrible, terrible. and my grandfather was unfortunately incinerated in Auschwitz. And he said that how do you refer to these sleds? They would refer to them as nagala, a wagon, because it was like a wagon but without wheels, which the Jews had to be the animal, that they quote unquote replacing animals that should be dragging these wagons. And he shares that that ever since that time, whenever he hears the word agala, which means a cart or a wagon, it arouses a sense of horror within him. It's just he becomes overwhelmed by that word. And he said, when I got out of the camps and then finally made it to the land of Israel, I would hear people say the prayer called Kaddish, which is the prayer we say after people have passed away. And in the Kaddish, we have the words Ba'agala uvizman kariv imru amen. I would hear the word Ba'agala. And to me, I thought that word means a wagon. And every time I heard the prayer, it created a horror in me. But then as I got older, I learned that the Kaddish prayer is written in Aramaic. It's not written in Hebrew. And the word Ba'agala in Aramaic means swiftly or speedily. That may what we are praying for happen, the coming of Mashiach happens swiftly. And then I understood this word very, very differently. And I understood that the way we are going to merit to swiftly have the coming of Mashiach is when we imbue within ourselves the other significance of this word Ba'agala, which is the egel, the calf, which represents the idea of a city being responsible for anyone who is in their city, because we take responsibility for each other and there is deep unity. We can spend far less time criticizing all of the wrongs of our fellow brothers. And we should be spending far more time embracing the beauty of our fellow Jews. And we will discover something amazing that will happen. You can do this with your family members. You can do this with your community members. You can do this with the broader Jewish people. You will discover that whenever you shine light on the beauty of another person, even if that beauty is minimal, they don't have a lot of beauty right now, at least that is clearly being revealed. You shine light on that beauty, and their beauty will grow. They will become a more beautiful person. You'll find something else interesting too, that when you shine light on their negativity, on their faults, do you know what's going to happen? Their faults will grow. Ba'agala teaches us, a wagon, a calf teaches us, let us focus on unity, and magical things happen. In Israel, the greatest challenge Israel faces is the split, the lack of harmony between the secular and the religious. And there is a deep responsibility, which Rabbi Lau tried to convey in many, many of his speeches and through his leadership, that we all have a deep responsibility to emphasize the unity, which means instead of the religious pointing out the faults of the secular, they should point out and be grateful for all of the things that the secular community provides them with. And the secular community, instead of pointing out all of the faults which are in the religious community, should appreciate the spirit, the spirituality that the religious community brings to Am Yisrael, to the Jewish people. If both sides do that, we will start coming together. And then we will actually have the power that lives within every single one of us. And then we will also have the coming of Mashiach.